It is now 7 p.m. and we're going to call the Committee of the Whole to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons,
Here.
Mr. Brown,
Here.
Mr. Jacobson, Mr. Madigan,
Here.
Ms. Marlin, here, Mr. Roberts,
Here.
Mr. Smythe, Mayor Pressing.
Here.
Approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make the motion.
Second?
Moved by Dennis and second by Ms. Marlin. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. Are there any additions to the agenda? Seeing none, we are now open for public input. If there's anyone who would like to address the Council's Committee of the Whole, I only have one public input card now from Bishop King James and Reverend Evelyn B. Underwood. We choose not to address members but ask that our position be entered into the record as follows. We are continually concerned about the Dr. Ellis subdivision sewer problems. Okay. All right. Seeing no one else, do we have any presentations tonight? Wow. I thought we were too. It's on the 20th. Okay. All right. Seeing no presentations, the staff report. Libby Tyler.
Good evening. In your packet, excuse me, is a January Business and Development Report, and I'd like to highlight a few items and make some announcements as well. The Urbana Arts Program grants have been closed. We received 46 applications, and in addition to the funds that the city has provided for these grants, the Center for Latin American and Caribbean Studies has pledged additional funds, and our arts coordinator position has now been posted. So if you know of folks who might be interested in that position, is now posted on our website. And other arts-related updates, the Open Scene grant, that's our NEA grant, is proceeding and now has scheduling for the artists that have been selected with a variety of dates. Among those would be DJ Derek Lindsay, writer Andrea Perkins, hip-hop artist Mother Nature, and theater collective H.L. Waters. They will be leading weekend intensives at the Independent Media Center. In Think Urbana, we continue to market this program. Our staff will be presenting to RE/MAX realtors. In addition, last week, you'll recall, I announced one breakfast, which is focused on our housing rehab contractors, folks interested in helping with the cities as well as the city of Champaign and Rantoul and Champaign County on participating in our remodeling programs. We do have a Think Urbana Home Builders Breakfast, and I put the posters on your desk this evening, and this is going to be Thursday, February 23rd, 8:30 a.m. at the Eastland Suites on North Cunningham in Urbana. And then the other breakfast will be the next day, February 24th, again at 7:30 a.m. in the El Toro in Springfield. We also have upcoming business and development luncheons, a Realtors Bus Tour, and we'll have a booth at the Home Garden and Design Expo to promote Think Urbana. On, let's see, some of these dates that I haven't touched on yet. The Open Scene Public Workshops, the first one's going to be February 24th and 26th. That Business and Development Luncheon is February 28th. We have an upcoming UBA Connections Over Coffee at the City View on February 23rd. In the, I don't know if that's morning or evening. Our CSA Fair is coming up March 3rd. Also the next first Friday, March 3rd. I know that's a very exciting event. And then also March 3rd will be super busy. There's a 12th Annual Innovation Celebration at Parkland College happening then. A couple businesses I'll highlight. The Bluebird Boutique was a successful lessee for the city's building at 212 West Green. and this will have women's apparel. So we're looking forward to welcoming them to the downtown. And also another new business of note at the Pines in Southeast Urbana, they will be opening a new ballet studio. And I think of all the dates I mentioned, you probably still have this Saturday coming up available. So the Curtis Road Corridor Study Public Workshop will be happening this Saturday, February 18th, 8:30 to 11 at Church of Christ, 2601 Philo Road. That's at the northwest corner of Philo and Windsor. And this is for our corridor study of the corridor from Neal Street to High Cross Road. So much of that would be in Urbana, and we'll be looking at roadway improvements and character along that stretch. So that's open to the public. Any questions on this report? Bill? I'm sorry.
Yeah, on the Think Urbana marketing, I know you've done quite a bit to developers and builders. What are we doing to reach out to potential home buyers? Just directly?
We work with realtors because, that's where the contacts are made. And I think we have very good connections. We've been meeting directly with realtors. We have general advertising as well. We put signs up. You've seen probably at all of the park facilities we've got signs. We have general advertising as well. So if people are thinking about maybe buying a new home or building a new home, hopefully they're thinking Urbana, and then the best connection will then be made when they contact their realtor. And we had a full bus last year. We'll get another full bus this year. We're going directly to the groups of realtors. I've been speaking with many local real estate agents who are aware of the program, and they're excited about it, and it gives them another reason, in addition to our great neighborhoods, schools, and parks, to show their clients properties throughout Urbana.
Okay, I'm thinking some people, a lot of our major employers, like say the school district has hundreds of people that work in the school district, don't live in Urbana. And I'm not sure that just waiting for a real estate agent to contact them is good enough. I don't know if they just would normally be thinking about buying a new house, but maybe if they're aware of this program and they're already working here, maybe we could do a little bit more to reach out to some of our major employers. And also the HR departments and departments at the U of I right now are doing a lot of recruiting. So anything we could do to let them know about the program, I think if we could get it more directly to the people that might be buying.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion.
Any other questions? Oh,
And just,
go ahead.
I had one other on the Highland Green. Oh yeah, no, that's fine. The TWG development has progressed in its purchase of both Aspen Court and Washington School. Can you say what that means? Progressed in its purchase.
Yes, and I think they were quite close to closing on Aspen Court. There is a HUD contract on that property, so there's a little bit of paperwork remaining to allow for the transfer of those HUD subsidized units over to TWG. I checked with the current owner last week, and once they get that paperwork back from HUD, they'll just have 10 days before closing. So they're already talking about the transition. The progress on both properties relates to the approval by IDA that they can proceed to apply for tax credits. So they've gone through the pre-application process on both properties. IDA, which is our Illinois Housing Development Authority, has some follow-up questions on the Aspen Court site, but they have been pre-qualified, and we'll be providing them a little more demographic data that they've requested. So that's what the progress is. I think in terms of the contingencies, there's there's far fewer contingencies at this point on the Aspen Court purchase and the Washington school purchase. So.
Dennis?
So the other part of that memo was the Urbana Townhome site and Brinshore development. And where do we stand with that one?
Yes, I was actually going to have, Kelly has a number of grants-related items that she'd like to update you on, so I was going to ask her to give you an update on that.
Any other questions for Libby? All right.
Good evening.
Good evening, Kelly.
So some of the grant-related items was, the first was going to be the selection of Brinshaw as developer for the Urbana Townhome site. Myself and the Housing Authority were on a panel, and there were several developers, and Brinshaw is the one who scored the highest, and so they were chosen to be the developer. Also, we are working
can I ask-
on...
Can I ask, so what does that mean as far as progress then? There's going to be a lengthy vetting of their with the home authority, with the housing authority?
I'm assuming that they will be doing what developers normally do, is that they'll be applying for low-income housing tax credits. They'll be applying to the Federal Home Loan Bank of Chicago, getting
Right.
all their financing in order. So
Okay, first step out the door. Okay.
We have an agreement that covers this, if you recall.
Yeah.
Was that it, Dennis?
Well, I just,
Oh, Diane?
has Brinshaw done other projects in Urbana? The name is very familiar, and I can't remember.
yes, they did Crystal View
Crystal View.
Townhomes.
Okay.
They also did several in Champaign as well.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, so we are going to be doing an income survey for the Learman neighborhood area, and we are working to get that mailed out this week. It is not, as of right now, due to the last census, that area is not as part of our target area, so we are doing this income survey to determine, because we feel that it is a low-income area. Per the CDBG regulations, it has to be at least 51%. So we are working on getting that done so that we can continue doing projects in that neighborhood. Currently, there is a RFP out for home funds. We have excess funds from previous years, so the Urban Home Consortium decided to do an RFP, and it is for affordable housing projects. It is on the city website. The application is due February 27th, and it's also help with any commitment issues that we might have. So, so far we haven't received anything, but we assume it will probably be to the last day that we will receive applications. Reminder also, the contractor's breakfast is on 2/24 at starting at 7:30. If you're interested in attending, certainly let myself or Randy Burgett, our housing rehab coordinator, know. You received the flyer. It has his contact information. Also wanted to let you know our fiscal year 17-18 annual action plan process is underway. In January, we had various public hearings throughout the city. The end of the month at our regular Community Development Commission meeting, we will be discussing a study session about the annual action plan, and there will be a public hearing in March, and it will be coming to council in April to be voted on beginning of May, because we need to submit it by the middle of May to HUD. And then as part of that, the Consolidated Social Service Funding process is beginning as well, starting next month. Applications will be available around the 6th of March. We're going to have a couple of trainings on the application that week, and the Community Development Commission will be setting priorities for the CDBG portion in March, and then applications will be due in April, and then discussion will begin regarding who to get funded for how much, and that will be coming to you with hopefully applications approved and allocations sometime in June. And we did receive a letter from HUD. Our NOFA, Notice of Funding Availability application for our supportive housing program was approved, and that grant starts March 1st, 2017 and runs till February 28th, 2018. And then lastly, I wanted to update you on our blight reduction program. As of right now, 13 of the 15 properties have been demolished, and the remaining 2 are owned by Habitat, and we are in the bidding process for demolition of those 2. Any questions, let me know.
Bill, Mike.
Mike.
Yeah.
Close enough. So I would be interested in looking at, and maybe this information is available, but if you could encapsulate it for me, that'd be great. I'm curious about looking at affordable housing permits, subsidized housing, as compared to non-subsidized housing starts in Urbana. So what are, say, the last 12 available months, and how do they compare? I'm just curious, because I think it's a good indicator of the health of the economy in Urbana to understand how many folks are deciding to live here or and build their house and get financing. I'm not including in subsidized housing like first-time home buyer. While that's technically a subsidy, I wouldn't include that. But I'd be interested in knowing how many other subsidized / affordable housing starts there have been, be that homes or apartment units, as compared to non-subsidized. And I would include first-time home buyer in the non-subsidized. I think that's fair. I just think that's an interesting number that we ought to take a look at and understand just what's happening here in Urbana. And it'd be also interesting to know, in comparison to Champaign, what those numbers are. I don't know how readily available those are, but I think it would be a nice metric for all of us to be able to look at to see how we're doing as an economy in terms of housing.
Libby?
We can certainly get those numbers, but I think a longer view would be more revealing. On the Highland Green, those are subsidized 33 units, but it took us 12 years to get those done. So in terms of infill in our target areas, we've seen, especially with the blight reduction program, we've seen steady infill replacement with Habitat for Humanity homes. And do you know offhand, Kelly, how many they've hit in Urbana?
About 48, I think, 46, 48 houses they
Yeah,
built.
and that's probably over 18 years, but they've been picking up the pace. And I think because we had Highland Green come online in 2016-17, permits were pulled in 16. That's not going to be the best year to look at. We will get to the numbers, but before Highland Green, our last one that we built of the type of homes that you're talking about would have been Dunbar Court, and that was Hamilton on the Park, and that was, I think, about 30 units, replacement units of public housing, so it wasn't like a net increase. Before that was Crystal View Townhomes. So in my 17 years at the city, there are those 3 projects. And 2 of them were replacement of older public housing.
I would say absolutely net those out.
Yeah,
Net them out.
sure.
Yeah. And if you want to look at some kind of increment other than 12 months, that's fine with me too. I'm just curious, where we are. I'm not trying to be a critic here. I'm wondering. We spend an inordinate amount of time here, and I understand why. Nobody comes here for a housing permit because they just take out the permit. There's no council action. but we spend a lot of time talking about subsidized housing. I'm just curious, how are we doing on the non-subsidized side in comparison? And if you want to net out replacements, that's perfectly understandable and acceptable to me. I mean, I'm really not trying to make any kind of case here. I just would like to know what the numbers are
Yeah.
for any period of time that you choose.
Yeah, that's fine. I think that's something we want to track, and we do have that building permit activity already in our building, annual reports, and on the other side for the annual action plans. And they are two super different types of activities. What Kelly does in her division is funded 100% by grants. So
So
I
what's
kind
the
of
funding
thought she
source of
doesn't
those
come here
grants?
to council very often to give an update. So
Right.
I thought, hey, there's all this stuff going on, and I was pretty excited about the Urbana Townhomes and the Aspen Court, but we don't mean to take up more time. Our Community Development Commission is a group that really spends a lot of time each month helping us.
Really not trying to take away from any of that at all. I just guess where I'm coming from is I think it is a fair measure of the health of the community in terms of who lives here. Are they making money? Are they able to make a mortgage, or do they need help? That kind of thing. And I think it's a fair thing to look at.
Sure.
So yeah, not trying to take away from anyone's efforts whatsoever, but I'm just curious about those numbers. And again, I would emphasize that I think it would be fair to compare, it would be instructive to compare to Champagne's numbers and just see what, if any, the difference is between the two communities.
All right, Charlie?
Mike, were you including multifamily then in that, or just single family?
No, units.
Units, okay, yeah, because I think it'd be
right.
good to keep the single family or single family duplex and multifamily sort of two
Separate
categories.
from-
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
No,
But
I
to
would
track
agree, but I
both
don't
of
think you
those.
want to exclude
Yeah,
anything,
right,
but
yeah.
yeah, you could
You wanna track
categorize
them.
it. Sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would agree.
Okay, any other questions for Libby or Kelly? I actually had a couple. Were you done?
Yes, I am.
Do I need to relinquish the chair? No. All right. All right, I just want to make sure. The Brenshaw project, are there federal dollars tied to that?
Yes.
So, what can you tell me about any MWVBE goals or anything like that as it relates to this project?
Since they were just chosen, we haven't met to go over that, but that is something that the Housing Authority, they have a Section 3 plan, and it is pretty much required to do that, and they keep track of that. So, so that will be definitely something that we'll make sure.
So it's
as
not
well.
a part of like when they turn in their RFP, when they turn in their bid, do they get extra points if they have minority participation in their initial bid or something like that?
Honestly, I don't remember if there are. It was the RFQ was actually for qualifications. I don't remember if it didn't sit in there specifically, but I can certainly look at that and see if there were like points and things like that in there. I just offhand I don't recall. It's been a while since I looked at that.
But it is required for that project. It will be required, the Section 3. And we're actually creating our own Section 3 plans. So when they prepare a plan, and there will be public involvement, we can get more into the details. We don't even know yet what intensity or type of development they'll pursue. They have just been selected as a developer for hire by the consortium of the city and the Housing Authority for this site, and I think 3 or more others in the county. Our involvement will be governed by the intergovernmental agreement that we entered into with the Housing Authority for the Urbana Townhome site, and that was it was a while ago, maybe 18 months ago, a year to 18 months ago.
So who makes up the consortium again?
Well, it's not like the Home Consortium where it's official. We're working with the Housing Authority under the terms of our intergovernmental agreement.
So it's just, in this particular situation for Brenshaw, where they were selected, it's Urbana and the Housing Authority.
Yes.
Is that right? Okay.
Yes.
And so I'm just trying to understand from the federal standpoint, there are particular guidelines or goals that have to be met in order to get federal dollars. Is that 20% minority participation? Is it 10%? 5?
I think it's like a whole, I believe that we presented you with as much as we knew at the time. I think Matt Ridgick has met with you and gone over those Section 3 requirements. My guess would be it'd be the same requirements, but I don't have them right here to tell you if it's 20%, but that would be, I would hope it would be 20%.
Well, one of the reasons why I'm raising it is because we have a lot of meetings. We talk to a lot of people. I don't recall all of the things that I got from Section 3, but I was just trying to make sure that that all of us understand it. Because the better all of us, staff and everybody included, then the better off we're going to be at holding folks accountable to that, right? And then the other question was on the blight reduction program. It said 13 out of the 15 were, did you say finished,
Demolished.
demolished? How do we use TIF dollars for that, to participate in that?
No. We use the blight reduction, and then if, and it's $35,000 per property. If it ends up costing a bit more, then we use our CDBG property acquisition funds.
So you may not remember, but we received a $500,000 grant from IDA, and there's a potential that we may be able to extend the program. So we've done very well in obtaining the funds and now executing the funds. Other municipalities have not been able to complete their goals, and it was a pretty tight timeline, and we've pretty much met those goals, so that's why we wanted to report on that.
So the $500,000 from IDOT was for the blight reduction? So IDA, I'm sorry.
Yes.
IDA
Mhm.
was for
Yes,
the-
it was one of their programs. it
And then
was-
do you turn around and use that same money out of that 500,000 to develop on those properties? No?
What they do is they give money to green those properties for like 3 years, and Habitat is our partner. So at the end of the 3 years, they'll be building housing on that, affordable housing.
So I'm just raising this because we do a lot of conversations here about TIF, and that blight is supposed to be one of the fundamental components of that, so I don't understand why.
So
I'm just
mostly for
curious.
acquisition and demolition and stabilization of the lots. So with 15, that's what it costs. 500,000 to buy 15 dilapidated properties, remove the homes, stabilize the lot, and then we work with Habitat on the reconstruction using their fundraising, plus they are still using funds from an Attorney General's grant award that they've received. So they also have been very successful in obtaining competitive funds.
No, I agree that, I mean, I think most of the community, many of these houses have been built in my ward, right? So some of my constituents say that's a good thing, some say not such a good thing, right? And so to, I think, Mike's point even, if we have TIF money that is available, that is supposed to be for blight, then why would we just build Habitat homes as opposed to other things or different types of homes that don't require Habitat support? Why wouldn't we use that as well, the TIF money, for some of that blight reduction?
We do not have TIF in residential areas in Urbana. That's a completely
Okay.
different type of TIF, has a higher bar. Over the years, we've been very successful in leveraging our HUD dollars to stabilize neighborhoods, develop the projects that I mentioned earlier, and leverage other funds and work with partners like Habitat for Humanity. The Eads at Lincoln subdivision was an earlier, some time ago, that was a use of HUD funds working with John Lee Johnson at the time. ICFCI was our JODO that we worked with. We worked with so many people, Urban League, Homestead. There's just been so many excellent community development organizations that we've worked with over the years to make this impact.
Okay.
And then the TIF, the law has changed so that it is much harder to use TIF for residential properties. There were some residential properties in TIF 3, but that's now all gone and closed out. And if you think about our downtown TIFs are exclusively commercial, industrial, and same with TIF 4. You can only have a very small percent of properties can be residential. So I think the use of TIF, they really seem to want you to use other methods or use a housing TIF, and that's just a whole different type of animal.
All right, thank you. Dennis?
Yeah, my understanding is that our TIF districts are for basically business and commercial development. We encourage retail development, and yes, there has been some demolition, but the purpose of it would be to engage developers to increase the bottom line of the assessed value of the properties. So residential building is really not that goal.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, Mike?
So, yeah, and I would just add to what Dennis said, not just the bottom line of the property, but also the ability of the property to generate additional tax revenue, sales tax, that kind of thing, right? Exactly. So I think that's why residential is not so much in the mix in TIF, because it doesn't generate those other residual forms of tax revenue. But you mentioned earlier, Libby, and real quick, you said something about grant money being funding a lot of the subsidized or affordable housing. Is any of that not tax dollars?
Well, ultimately, somewhere, some of it's settlement dollars, like that Attorney General.
Which is another form of a tax.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
there's a big pot. We all know that. There's a federal, I mean, it's,
But isn't it fair to say that virtually all of the grant dollars that we receive are taxpayer money on some level, federal, state?
yeah, probably at some level. They're generated somehow, and then communities that jump through all the hoops get their share.
No,
And-
my point is the source, not who jumps through the hoops,
Yeah.
but what is
Yeah,
the source?
Source is
So-
us. We tax-paying people.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right. I just, for the record, I want to say I pay federal, state, and local taxes. So I don't, it's unimpressive to me when people say these are grant dollars, other than the hard work of staff and the city to get our fair share of that back. But they're still tax dollars.
And I think that our property values benefit when we don't have the blight, for example, and the
Fair enough.
BRP.
You bet. You bet. Again, not trying to be a critic. I'm just trying to see that comparison
Sure.
between
Of course.
kind of the free market and the subsidized market.
Any other questions? Bill?
Sorry, just real quick. We talked a little bit about Think Urbana earlier, but we didn't really say what it was. So for the 5 people watching at home and a few people in the audience, could you just briefly say what the average savings might be? What, $15,000 to $20,000 over the first 5 years on property taxes on a new home you
Yeah,
might build?
It could be very significant. It can be 80%, up to 80% off of your property tax bill. If you build a new home or duplex in Urbana, in our developing neighborhoods, and this is very beneficial. You'll have a lower tax bill than other surrounding communities, and we think that's important because as people move into a new home, they need all the help they can get in making the purchase, furnishing the home, building the home. It's very beneficial. We also have a tax break on the sales tax for building materials, which is close to 9%. So as people make their decisions and they look at our excellent neighborhoods, schools, and parks, and the cost of actually building that new home, this gives them like a 5-year kind of a ramp up period where it really kind of takes some of the burden off of that decision to build a new home. So Think Urbana, we've got a webpage on this, Think Urbana. We've got events coming up. We have signs, commercials. We're so excited about it.
Thank you.
Anyway, any other questions? All right, thank you too. Thank you both. Bill. And while Bill's coming up, I just want to make sure that I want to say to Public Works that I appreciate the street sweeper coming down the streets more often. And I have a UCAP meeting coming up, and I didn't want to go back to that meeting without letting Mr. Johnson know I did tell you that y'all need to sweep the streets more, because.
Thank you. That's what happens when you have a favorable winter, and we can send our crews out and do that kind of work, and the streets do look great from a sweeping standpoint. I wanted to alert council, if you haven't heard or read about the fatality at Racine University Saturday night, I thought it'd be appropriate to let you know where IDOT is. You may recall in October of 2015, they came here and revealed the results of the road safety assessment and study, and came up with a litany of things of possible improvements. Actually, over a month ago, I was in touch with IDOT to kind of get an update, and they are currently in what's called a preliminary design phase. They hope to be done this summer with that preliminary design. They do plan to have a meeting to talk about some of their findings and what they're thinking about for specific improvements on the corridor of University Avenue between Maple Street at the east end and Wright Street on the west end. After this summer, then they'll move into final design. I don't have a construction timetable. I know that there are safety dollars that are committed to do the project, IDOT safety dollars, tax dollars, to do that project, but I don't have a timetable on it. But this is probably the 7th or 8th fatality we've had in the last 5 years. It's incredibly high number in this corridor area. So it's serious. We're taking it serious. And I know IDOT is too, and they're making a commitment here, but at this juncture, it can't be soon enough. So I just wanted to let you know that was the IDOT status of their design.
Any questions? So just, Bill, I'm sorry. Charlie, did you have a question? No. So I was approached, Martell Miller approached me about a week ago talking about, may have been the same gentleman in the wheelchair, and how close he came to, he didn't see the gentleman, how close he came to maybe hitting him himself one day, and reported, I think maybe even reported to the police department. I don't know, are there any particular, I guess, rules or rules of the road or something as it relates to individuals in wheelchairs? Are they supposed to be, I know this gentleman was crossing the street, but I've seen the same gentleman in the street and in the bike lanes in various different places, and I didn't know if there was some particular rules around individuals who are moving around in wheelchairs. I don't know.
I can't comment too much on that other than what I know and read about the specifics of this particular crash. But as I know, he was crossing University Avenue within the crosswalk.
Yeah.
And we checked first thing this morning. Everything was functioning properly at the intersection. The signals, the timing, the street lights, the PED buttons, everything was working just fine. And so there were no, anything wrong from that standpoint. But can a wheelchair, can a pedestrian, can a bicyclist cross a roadway? Absolutely they can. I mean, you wait for your time frame, you wait for your gap, you wait for the signal to turn. I can't speak specifically to this circumstance, but even if it was a green light for East or westbound University and there's a bike or a ped or a wheelchair there, I mean, you have to yield. I mean, you have to stop, so that part's clear. I think police would support that. And
No,
there's a
I mean,
ticket,
I'm pretty clear on the crosswalk part. I've seen that particular gentleman. I saw him in various different places, and I was just wondering if there was some particular law or something or ordinance that we had around it. Yeah, Dennis.
Yeah, I think the laws are that the wheelchairs should be on the sidewalks, and we make accessible ramps for them to use them. They're not always available, and I have seen wheelchairs in the streets, and I don't think that that's a legal place for them to be. They're not a car. A bike can be in the street. A wheelchair is a different thing. Just like a golf cart, they're not supposed to be on the city streets either in most communities. They're not. I don't think the wheelchairs are supposed to be using bike lanes. It's too dangerous. I think they're supposed to be using sidewalks officially.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Thanks, Bill. All right, is that it for staff reports, or do we have more? No, that's it? I cannot pull the email up, but I don't guess I wouldn't consider it a staff report. But if anyone has the email we received earlier from the chief about some of the activities that took place, some of the actions that the UPD was involved with over the past couple of days, I think that would have been at least appropriate to share some of it. I found some of it. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize you wanted me to speak to it. I just wanted to make everybody aware of the fact that this weekend, unfortunately, as Bill mentioned, we had a fatality involving the traffic accident. We also had a number of other events, so I wanted to just keep you apprised of what was going on because we were incredibly busy. In addition to that, because, for instance, Friday night we had an event on the east side of Urbana. It's the geographic location, police responsibility for one house may be in the city of Urbana and the next house is in the county. County was called to a shots fired call and a barricaded subject, but they were extremely distant and our officers were very close to the scene, so they actually responded, secured the scene, dealt with the kids, were able to get the person who was responsible for a shooting out of that. While they were there, they heard the shots fired over at Austin. Literally 5 police officers, and I'm going to recognize them later, but 3 of ours literally saved this victim's life by using a tourniquet that we carry in our squad cars because he would have bled to death. He was shot multiple times. He survived as a result of the quick actions of the Urbana Police as well as the Champaign County Sheriff's Office. 2 deputies responded to that. We had a number of other events that took place throughout the weekend. So it was just an incredibly busy weekend. Some robberies took place and some people were identified for that. So we also had a suicidal subject. So it was just a violent weekend with a lot of guns. So I just shared that with you. I didn't know if you wanted me to read it all or just kind of summarize it, but that's the gist of what happened.
Well, I was asking you to do it because I thought it was, especially the one about the individual who was shot.
Yeah, that was incredible work.
The tourniquets and to save somebody's life. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Thank you.
I think that's important.
Thanks.
Commendable. Thanks. Appreciate it. All right. All right. Moving on. Ordinance. Ordinance number 2017-01-008, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code, Chapter 20, Articles 2 and 5, Public Works.
Thank you. I'm Brad Bennett, Assistant City Engineer for the Engineering Division. This is Lori Pearson, the Planning Division Manager. I'll be here tonight to talk a little bit about the right-of-way related items in reference to these proposed revisions, and Lori is here for any of the zoning related matters. I want to start out with just saying that, you know, this has been a joint department division effort. We've had participation with the legal division, the community development department, and public works in this. So kind of a little bit of review from the last time we came in front of you to talk about why we're looking at some proposed revisions to the right-of-way ordinance, and it has to do with smart cell technology. So this has to do with the wireless mobile telecommunications. We're all familiar with the model of the big, you know, cell tower that our phones ping off of for their data. In order to increase the capacity of that network, because everyone's using their smartphones for all kinds of data related items, they're looking at actually going away from the model of these big antenna structures to smaller antennas that are typically mounted on some sort of utility pole infrastructure. And you can see this graphic is an example of it. Now, we have found out some additional information about the smart cell technology. Lori and I participated in a webinar where we saw examples in Boston, Massachusetts, and Lincoln, Nebraska, where they've rolled these out. In those communities, their devices were from the Verizon company, and they were mounted on streetlight poles is examples that they showed there. AT&T has let us know that they've actually rolled this smart cell technology out in Chicago as well, once again mounted on streetlight poles up there. So what prompted this whole look at revising the right-of-way ordinance was we had a company come in called Mobility that was looking at installing 75-foot tall utility poles in order to carry this type of equipment here in Urbana. There were 3 locations in the city right-of-way and then 1 on IDOT right-of-way. So as, you know, kind of in advance of the license agreement to install these in right-of-way, they submitted on November 4th some special use permit applications to install these poles. So that's kind of what triggered us wanting to go in and looking at the right-of-way ordinance. Obviously, when the right-of-way ordinance was originally written, we hadn't anticipated smart cell technology. The ordinance really wasn't written in order to properly protect the city, you know, from this particular type of utility installation. So as part of the process of doing the right-of-way revisions, we did reach out to other utilities. We did contact Comcast, Ameren, and AT&T. Both Comcast and Ameren really didn't have much input. AT&T did provide us with a considerable amount of input. We received comments from them on January 4th, 2017. If you remember, on the previous presentation to council, we asked for a delay so that we could actually meet with them and go over some of their concerns and some of their suggested revisions. So we did meet with AT&T representatives on January 27th, 2017. It was a very positive, productive meeting. Some of the things that we learned at that meeting was that AT&T plans to roll out the smart cell technology to the Champaign-Urbana area over the next year. The only other community they've rolled this out in the state of Illinois is Chicago. So, I mean, I think that shows, you know, kind of our hierarchy in the municipalities in the state of Illinois. They also indicated to us in discussions their first preference is to install on existing utility poles, particularly Ameren poles. We're working with Ameren to come up with an agreement to be able to utilize their poles to put this smart cell technology on. They are, you know, have some limitations as far as the smart cell technology goes. You know, they generate, you know, some maps as far as where, you know, these particular antennas have to be located, you know, to fill the capacity needs that they need. And then once they have those geographic areas, then they try to select a nearby utility pole or location for that. They indicated to us their second preference was to put them on streetlight poles, which, like I said, I mentioned we've seen them do that in Chicago and Lincoln, Nebraska, and Boston, Massachusetts. And then they said really their last option was, you know, putting a pole up in the right-of-way. So we, like I said, we did get some good input from them. And then based on their input, you're going to see in some of our proposed revisions, there were some modifications, and these are going to be shown as red text. We'll point out, too, we only had discussions with AT&T, but we feel that the proposed revisions and accommodations we took into account for AT&T would be applicable to all other wireless telecommunications providers, whether they're Verizon or T-Mobile or any of the other providers out there. So from last time, you see we were looking at limiting the installation of the antennas to occur on existing utility poles rather than construction of the new cell towers and monopoles in the right-of-way. Once again, no change in that. There was no change in the requirement that they locate these on arterial streets, with the idea being that's where we usually have the widest right-of-way. We did make a modification as far as the height of the antenna. Originally it was 5 foot. They had requested it going up to 7 feet. They just said the existing equipment technology that they had, they actually could not be able to meet the 5 foot requirement. So that is a change we made for them. We limit the size of the antenna equipment. Originally it was to 5 square feet. They asked for it to be increased to 7 cubic feet of volume. And remember, this is at the top of the pole. Once again, that was based on what the size of the equipment that is currently technologically available is. limit the size of related equipment to 24 cubic feet in volume, and kind of the same situation. That's to match what sort of existing equipment that they have. We're requiring that not more than one antenna can be placed on a utility pole, and that the antennas have to be at least 300 feet apart. We're requiring written permission be obtained from the utility owning the poles where the antennas are and related equipment are proposed to be installed. Most of the wooden utility poles you see in town are owned by AT&T or Ameren. So, that's obviously the first preference for them to go. Point out, if they were to install antennas on city streetlights, that would have to be covered under a license agreement that would come before council for approval. And in that license agreement, the specific conditions would be placed as far as the use of the pole. This is a new item that we added, based on AT&T's feedback, and maybe Jim can comment on this a little bit more, but we do run into situations where either there is no above ground utility poles, like out in some of the newer subdivisions where they're, all the electric and telephone and cable television and telecommunications is underground, or you could run into situations, like I said, based on where they geographically need to locate a pole, that there is none available. And Jim, do you want to comment a little bit on maybe how the requirements we have as far as providing them access to the right-of-way and why we added this provision?
Both federal and state law prohibit us from blanketly barring telecommunications service providers from locating or using the right-of-way. They have a right to use our right-of-way free of charge other than a permit or application fee. We can't charge them a monthly license fee, for example. However, under case law, it's not as far-reaching as the telecommunication industry would like to suggest, but there are some constraints, public health, safety, that kind of thing, that we can, and with some balance of aesthetics, though aesthetics can't be controlling, to which allow us to do some regulation. That's why we pretty much went to this hierarchy that Brad has suggested. Private utility poles like Ameren's or their own, in the case of AT&T, their own poles, then street lights, if possible, and then ultimately a monopole or some kind of a small antenna on a building structure or facility. AT&T has locations they would like to develop, but we have a provision in our ordinance, our proposed ordinance, which they've agreed to and we think others would agree to, that before they go out and actually locate or do any kind of construction, that they confer with the city engineer. And if for some reason that appears to be not acceptable to us, we will work with them to assist them in their effort to locate. So it's kind of an unusual provision requiring cooperation. We've done that with one or two other utilities.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, this is probably a good place to mention this. As you know, I was recently visiting my parents in San Diego. I'd noticed, and maybe I'd missed it several times before, but I noticed this time passing through that they have a cell phone tower that looks like a palm tree. And it blends right in. It's actually located on private property right in their palm trees. How would how would I think I've heard that they can be made to look like pine trees and stuff like that too. So how does our ordinance cover camouflaged equipment like that? It would be sort of a monopole, but not exactly.
That's a good question and a good point, and I know that Jim did include some language as far as dealing with the color of the facility, as well as shrouds for the cable going up it to try to minimize the visual impact of it. We don't have any provisions as far as making it look like a a tree, but there are, as you know, some as far as, you know, matching the color of the other utility poles and stuff at that location.
Oh, I guess the converse here is that, you know, what if somebody came in and said, well, we want to put something in that will blend in better, like this, and Jim might.
Well, I think you more or less said the magic word when you were talking about what you observed in San Diego, and that is the word private. We do not, per se, regulate what agreements a private property owner and a utility except, you know, for the very tall, unsightly towers. We, as Brad indicated, we don't have any prescribed camouflage. Obviously, the camouflage has to be balanced. We've more or less tried to look at it in terms of color, in terms of a monopole fitting in to the general landscape area. But our camouflaging was mostly for the cabinets that are on the ground and may sit in the right-of-way, so we don't have a bunch of metal cabinets spread around. There has to be a balance between the width of the right-of-way, the location of the cabinet, as well as the serviceability to the cabinet, accessibility, and the camouflage. Obviously, you can't have bushes and plantings growing up against where the doors open up for the cabinet. And some right-of-ways are very narrow, others are obviously wider. So we can't prescribe every possible camouflaging situation. If they come in, based on the city engineer's authority to work with them, Bill might approve, I don't know, about a palm tree, maybe an ash tree or something like that in there.
Mayor, and then Dennis.
I was going to suggest ash trees or elm trees that would be trouble-free.
Yes.
Yeah, Brad, I sent you an email, and I'll just bring it up. I thought you probably supposed to address it, and you probably thought about it and be ready for response. But
Yeah.
So it's useful to know that you want to use their own utility poles. I think that's great. I guess I could put my mic on. I think it's important that we first give them the option of using their own poles that are already existing to mount these things on. And I was concerned about placing poles, whether they be brand new or just the equipment themselves, next to street intersections. And what I wrote is, adding another utility pole or on an arterial street intersection will compete with or visually interfere with existing post-mounted traffic signal devices and the usual collection of traffic control signs found at many intersections. We already have a lot of signage at an intersection. And my other concern was that at intersections we are adding ADA handicap accessible ramps into the street from the sidewalk. And when you have an addition of these control boxes, some of them look to be rather large, and you're talking about 24 cubic feet. That's 2 by 3 by 4. That's a fairly sizable control box. And if it's going to be at an intersection where there's sidewalk crossing the street, that's just going to make it harder for people who are pedestrians, bicyclists perhaps, and people who are using wheelchairs. It's just going to be one more confusion at the street corner. And I'm thinking about how many posts we already have to hold up the street lights and the signs and the timed crossings on Main Street, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So my suggestion was that if they're going to do any kinds of installation of equipment, it should be not at the street corner, but maybe 100 feet to the side. So if they're using existing lights or existing power poles, it may not be a question. But would it be worth adding a concern or a qualification about how close they can be to the intersection itself?
Yeah, I mean, we could do it. We currently have in a restriction that they can't be within 400 feet of a residence. So, you know, I'm sure that's a restriction that we could write in. Do you want to comment on that?
We have to be careful in just writing a restriction because of all the location dynamics. The locations vary from intersection to intersection. One of the things we can do is, based on a request, let's say we're talking about a monopole, which is an additional, or a cabinet that's an additional visual restriction. We can regulate those based on demonstrated need for safety. And I think we are better off leaving that for interpretation for each intersection situation. What might be good for Vine and Main may not work for Main and Race. We have to see how the layout is. So we have built in some discretion. But whenever we deny somebody an opportunity, a utility or telecommunications service provider, the request to install a monopole or some cabinet, we have to have a evidentiary reason to support our denial. And that's why we built in this cooperative effort.
Okay, I agree with that. But we're not, I mean, this restriction of offsetting it from the street corner doesn't deny them to have the access of the pole on the street or the service on the street itself. I'm just saying that if there was a...
They can't put it on the street.
Down slightly, right? Just you're moving it off the street corner.
It can be moved. It may work near a street corner, it may not. It depends on the configuration of the right-of-way and the spacing and all. So I think if we start trying to, lock ourselves into very specific dimensions that are applicable across the entire city or every arterial street that forms an intersection, I think we are making it more difficult for us to support that ordinance, because they'll come in and say, well, these concerns you have here really don't exist here because of the configuration. I think there's some discretion with the experts, Brad, Lori, and Bill, and within the city. I think the application of the expertise to say yes or no is a better way to go. I think it's a more defensible way to go. AT&T has been cooperative, but some of these telecommunications providers have been pretty aggressive. And if they don't like what they hear, they can be pretty litigious. And I think if we add some rationale and require documentation as evidence why we say no, we are far more protected in a court action than trying to do a broad blanket without any analysis of every...
Well, we already are saying that they can't be more than 300 feet in conjunction, next to each other, and 400 feet in another way. I mean, we're already setting up restrictions.
Well, the 300 feet between each monopole, let's say, or between each antenna, that's based on a technological metric. The radius for these things run anywhere from 300 feet to, 22 or 2,600 feet, depending on height, obstruction, and other materials in the area. That's the reason for that. It's not a site or a safety issue.
Well, Dennis, Charlie thinks he can answer a couple of your concerns.
That's great.
Yeah,
Go ahead. I appreciate that.
I think Section 20-312, the visibility triangle section, applies here. Doesn't it? Exhibit A, page 8 and 9?
Correct.
I mean, yeah, so I think your concerns are covered by the visibility triangle situation already. So I don't see why any new language would be needed because visibility triangle is part of the whole ordinance.
Go ahead.
Just to add one more comment. Whether it's city facilities like streetlight controllers or traffic signal controllers or cabinets, as Brad is alluding to, by utility companies, we're very careful to go out into the field to locate these, to make sure all these concerns are addressed. For example, not too many years ago, UVerse was extending its system in Urbana, and they had some fairly large boxes. And whenever those permits came in and they were located at a certain location, I would make sure that a staff person went out to the field with the appropriate representative to site where they should go. Or even on a lunch break, whatever, Brad and I or whatever, we go out and look at certain locations and make sure we're sensitive to various things. We don't want a box in front of your picture window in your living room, for example. You know, I mean, just there's certain things where you put them and where you don't want to put them. I appreciate your comment, I really do, but I think to arbitrarily pick a number, 100 versus 50 versus 200, I can tell you that we're going to want to locate these cabinets to take everything into consideration, whether it's visibility in front of someone's window, driveways, all kinds of issues like that. But yeah, intersections, you want to keep them as clear as you can. And I think arguably they probably aren't going to put them close to an intersection anyway, but we'll see with respect to this. So I think the pledge here is, as I speak, that we will physically go in the field with these individuals and locate them in the best location. And that has worked well, and so far all the utility companies have played ball well that way.
So we're not going to experience them wanting to put it at a particular location because it's the prime location that they consider it by right.
Right, because I think there's been some leeway. You know, typically you don't have to be in this exact 5 feet, okay?
Okay.
There's usually quite a bit of play in that regards. I realize there's so many 100 feet that they want to do to develop their bandwidth or whatever they're trying to do, but I think particularly in an intersection, I think we understand pretty solidly that we're not going to clutter an intersection with 4 controllers by 4 different providers. If for some reason
I don't know if we can guarantee that, but I like the attitude of at least having an overview on that project.
Right.
Bill.
I know we're limited what we can charge as far as permit fees. We can't charge permit fees for CLECs, the competitive local exchange carriers. Are these, I mean, is Monolite, are they an exchange carrier and we won't be able to charge them any sort of permit fee?
Well, that's a very good question on the mobility. We're not sure that they would qualify as a utility. That's kind of an item of debate that we've had with them. Jim, do you want to comment a little bit more on that?
They claim to be a CLEC. However, when you ask them for their tax returns to show that they're paying the tax, they somehow never seem to produce them. And just anyone, you could qualify for that, I could qualify for that, but unless you're paying the tax, it's questionable. Mobility, what their business plan is to build these 75-foot monopoles and then allow various telecommunication service providers like AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, what have you, to string their facilities up and down the pole. So they are not actually in the business. They are not a telecommunications company as defined by federal and state law in that respect.
Okay. I just noticed in the article you gave us from APA, they kind of made a point of making sure not to shortchange ourselves on what we could charge for, because we are spending a lot of staff time on it, I think. I had another question on that slide you have up. I know you probably have more. But said the new monopoles won't be installed within 400 feet of a private residence. Does private residence include multifamily and owner-occupied and non-owner-occupied? Is it any residence?
We probably need to better define that. I don't know if we have defined that. That's something we could look at doing.
I don't think we've specifically defined it, what constitutes multiple family versus single family.
Okay, yeah, I didn't see a definition. I think that might need to
And
be
I
defined.
don't think we would distinguish between owner-occupied or lease premises.
Okay,
Brad,
thanks.
you got some more? Do you have more of your
Yeah, I have
presentation?
a
Please
couple. Well, I will
proceed.
finish up this slide. So with these new, if a monopole is allowed by the city engineer, we limit the height to 30 feet. You know, for example, mobility wanted 75 feet and limit the diameter to 12 inches, once again, to try to match what existing utility poles, would look like in a particular neighborhood. We would, prohibit new monopoles within 400 feet of a private residence. And then one other thing we started discussions about last time too, and this was at a request of several of the telecom providers, was allowing administrative approval of license agreements, particularly with all the fiber optic going into town. So we did draft up some revisions that would allow the mayor to execute license agreements for underground utilities. Now, I want to point out this is just for underground utilities, so anything above ground, like the smart cell technology, if AT&T decides it wants to put them on some of the city streetlight poles, or for example, the 25 o'clock brewery with, you know, their license agreement for adding the patio in the right of way in front of their business. Those items would still have to come to full council for approval. And then, just to give you a little update, so we've gone through this whole presentation, and it all might be for naught, because there is some pending legislation at the state level, basically to strip the ability of communities to be able to regulate the use of their right-of-way relative to small wireless facilities. And I'll point out, IML is opposing this. They've actually prepared a model ordinance that they feel, you know, adequately provides for the utilities, balancing it against the needs of the municipalities. And we did look at the IML ordinance, and we included appropriate sections in our ordinance. Some of our language we did borrow from them. I feel our ordinance is actually a little bit more restrictive than what the IML is, and tailored more for the city's need here. But that wanted to make you aware of that. At the state level, there is presently a pending legislation to take away what we're talking about tonight. So with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Sounds like everybody already asked all their questions. Thank you all very much. Charlie?
Move to send this to council recommendation for approval.
Second.
It's been moved and second. Moved by Charlie Smythe, second by Diane Marlin. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. Ordinance number 2017-02-006, an ordinance amending Schedule J of Section 23-183 of the Urbana Local Traffic Code, prohibiting parking at all times on certain streets, Hill Street between Romine Street and Goodwin Avenue, Public Works.
Good evening, Craig Schonkwaller, the other assistant city engineer. The ordinance before you removes parking restrictions on the south side of Hill Street between Romine and Goodwin, and places parking restrictions on the north side of the street on the same blocks. The change in on-street parking at this location was requested by Crisis Nursery. The reason for the request was Crisis Nursery felt it would be safer for children being dropped off at their building if the on-street parking was moved to the side near that building. Shifts in on-street parking from one side to the other should occur within a safe minimum distance or at controlled intersections. On Hill Street, there are controlled stops at Romine and also at Goodwin, so that is why the restrictions occur over 2 blocks instead of 1. The Traffic Commission discussed this request at its December meeting, and after consideration, the Commission recommended proceeding with the parking restrictions before you. Following the meeting, the Traffic Commissioners were contacted by one property owner and one renter, voicing opposition to the parking restrictions. Both felt that Crisis Nursery did not do enough within their property to address parking. Miss Stephanie Record with Crisis Nursery is here to answer any questions if you have any.
Yes, we do. If you have, is she here?
Yes.
Okay.
Hello.
Good evening. Who was it? Who had the question?
I
Dennis?
did. Yeah. I was just wondering if actually it was more for Craig. Is there parking allowed on Romine on the east side, which is around the corner from the restrictions that you've suggested we adopt this afternoon?
I'd have to look that up. I don't recall. Do you recall, Bill? We'd have to look that up.
On
Romine? Do you recall?
That's on the west
on
side
the west
of the
side
building?
of the building. There's parking on that east side of that street. There's like 2 spots between the railroad tracks and Hill Street, 2 or 3 spots there, and then there's spots on the other side as well.
Does Crisis Nursery own the vacant lot that's completes the 1300 block of Hill? Your address is 1300, is that correct?
We're 1309 West Hill, and we own that entire,
The entire
block.
block.
We own everything behind us as well, except for the house that Habitat, there was a lot that Habitat had a house on that they tore down. I think, is that Matthews?
Did you think that you're ever going to build a parking lot?
We did expand the parking lot on the building, and so that has alleviated a lot of the overflow traffic from volunteers and groups that come to the nursery to help and assist with the children. But the secure entrance for clients and families is only in the front. So we don't allow them to come through that back door. If clients park in the back with their children, they have to walk all the way around to the front of the building to enter. And that's an option. It's just not ideal with different weather circumstances and small children.
Yeah. So I know did you have a question? No. So I know we've gone through this a couple of times, but it's been a while. Been over to Crisis Nursery. Craig and I have talked about this. The houses on Hill Street, on the north side of Hill Street, on the south side of Hill Street, how much parking are we giving up over there again? How many?
So there will actually be if we proceed with the parking changes as planned, there will be a net gain of 4 spaces between Romine and Matthews. Between Matthews and Goodwin, it would be a wash. So it would be the same amount of spaces that are presently there now.
But those spaces would, of course, be gained on the south side of the street.
Right.
Right. So the individuals who have north side of the street, okay, it's definitely confusing looking at it from this way. But, okay, the point for me is the individuals who are living on Hill Street, we said, looks like 60% said that there weren't any particular concerns. Those who express concerns, are they losing parking in front of their homes?
The 2 that expressed, one was on the south side, and actually the lady didn't want parking in front of her property. The one on the north side is the renter, and they would be losing parking in front of their property.
So they don't have a driveway?
Well, this particular property is on the corner, so there wasn't a lot of space. They lose space anyway at that property because of it. There's a restriction, no parking here to corner. So it's kind of a wash, but what she had told me, she just didn't want to cross the road now when she gets groceries out.
Any other questions? Yeah, Dennis.
I guess I'll take the bullet and I'll recommend that ordinance 2017-0206 concerning parking on Hill Street be sent to City Council with approval.
Second.
So then moved by Dennis, and second by Madigan, I believe.
Yeah.
Any further discussion? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it.
Thank you.
Ordinance number 2017-02-007, an ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance for FY 2016-17, the Cohen Building Development, EAB Treatment Program, and other items. Finance was supposed to do this, but the mayor's going to do it.
Yeah, Elizabeth Hannon is not feeling well tonight, so she asked me to do it. I think it's pretty clear from her memo. Does anybody have a question about any of the items? It's the agreement that you approved last week, and the Bassett training costs, we're still going to have more revenue coming in than the expenses, and the emerald ash borer treatment, the greenscapes, and doing a little permanent building for the farmers market so they can store things, and also help the clients come and do the financial transactions for SNAP. So this is going to cost a total of, well, I don't have a total there, but the ending fund balance is going to be $8.8 million, which is 27% of the recurring expenditures. And we think that when you think of the potential that we might have to repay if we lose the hospital case, it would be 4.7 million, slightly lowering us below our 15% ideal for the fund balance.
Any questions? Diane?
I'm just ready to move. I'll move ordinance number 2017-02-007 to council with a recommendation for approval.
Second.
Moved by Diane, second by Charlie. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. I did have a question that I was going to ask Elizabeth, but I'll try that. Yes, indeed. I'm seeing it. And this was in relationship to money that we received back from the hotel. Did it have to come to a? Did we have to review that as a council to vote on that to receive that?
No, we had an agreement, and this was a few years ago. I can't remember exactly what year, but the agreement was very specific that if the hotel was not an operating hotel, we had various requirements, then we would get the money back.
So when we get that money back, where does it appear in the budget? When we got that back, where does it go?
I'd have to find out what the actual account was. Back in the TIF. It was a TIF loan.
Okay. All right. And so it doesn't, but it clarifies for me that we don't, like, I know sometimes when departments come, they have to we have to approve even if they receive a grant. But when we
No.
receive money back like that, we don't have to.
Yeah, because we'd already spelled out the conditions that he either kept it or he returned it, depending on the outcome of his efforts.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Resolution number 2017-02-009R, a resolution approving an intergovernmental collaboration agreement, assessment of fair housing, PY 2020, community development.
I have an updated agreement. The program participates on the first page. I have their correct titles. Otherwise, it's the same agreement. So what this is a resolution approving an intergovernmental collaboration agreement for the assessment of fair housing for program year 2020. This assessment was formerly known as the analysis of impediments to fair housing. The regulations that govern this, the affirmatively furthering fair housing, were revised and updated, and so it was then changed to assessment of fair housing. Also, per the revisions to the regulations, program participants are required to regionally look at fair housing and are strongly encouraged to collaborate with other consolidated planning jurisdictions and public housing authorities. So this agreement will solidify the collaboration amongst area public housing authorities and local jurisdictions. As you can see on the agreement, there are 5 cities, 1 county, and 5 public housing authorities considered in this region. The City of Urbana will be the lead entity due to being the lead entity for the Urbana Home Consortium. So at its January 24th, 2017 meeting, the Community Development Commission forwarded the proposed resolution to the Urbana City Council with a unanimous recommendation for approval. Any questions?
Bill?
Yeah, I should have looked it up, but I read something a week or so ago about a bill being introduced in the House to limit the amount of data that the federal government could provide in order to support looking at fair housing situations. Do you know anything about that?
I do not. I have
Okay.
not. I've been keeping a watch over emails and such from HUD, but I have not seen anything about that.
Okay.
So
it looked
far,
like it had a lot of sponsors, but I couldn't tell how serious it was.
Okay.
So I'll try to get the number.
Any further questions or discussion? Charlie?
I'll just move to send this to council with the recommendation for approval.
Moved by Charlie, second by Dennis. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. I had a quick question I guess I could ask Bill offline though, so seeing no further business, this meeting is adjourned.